Do you want to take control of your health? Hear the truth about dieting and weight loss? Learn the best strategies for maintaining a healthy lifestyle? This is the Yossi Muller Show.
And welcome to the show. I'm Yossi Muller.
And I'm Duddy Muller.
Duddy is a chef with a background in nutrition.
Yossi is a nutritionist with a background in nutrition.
Every show we do, we take another myth and debunk it.
Crush it.
Today's topic is overweight people have slow metabolisms. People think that if someone's overweight, chances are they have a slow metabolism. And if someone is not overweight, chances are they have a normal or even fast metabolism.
And that would explain overweight to skinny. A skinny person has a fast metabolism. That's why he's skinny. An overweight person has a slow metabolism. That's why that person is overweight. Everything is explained and perfect.
Except that that is entirely untrue.
How do you know that this is not true, Yossi?
So there are statistics on metabolism testing. Hundreds of thousands of people have had their metabolism tested, and there's no difference between thin people and overweight people.
Wow.
I myself have tested hundreds of metabolisms, and it was confirmed in my practice that overweight people are not any more likely than thin people to have a slow metabolism. I also keep track of thousands of clients who keep track of their calories and weigh themselves. And based on that, I'm able to figure out what their metabolism is. You know, if someone's consuming a certain number of calories and they're losing weight at a certain pace, we're able to calculate what their metabolism is.
Because the metabolism is
the number of calories a person burns every day by existing. So if I know how many calories a person is consuming and how their weight changes, I can deduce the number of calories they are burning
on a daily basis, which is what the metabolism is.
Absolutely. And this may come as a surprise to you, but overweight people aren't overweight because of their metabolism, but because they have consumed, on average, 10 million more calories per day. I'm sorry.
Not per day.
10 million more calories over the course of their lifetime up until this point than thin people.
Oh my gosh, 10 million more calories.
Absolutely.
That explains a lot about the being overweight.
An overweight person consumes 700 more calories per day than a thin person, and there are 365 days in a year, and the average age of an American is 38 years old.
And quickly we do some advanced calculus and we get to the number of
10 million calories.
Yes, so you mentioned testing people's metabolisms to determine who has slower and faster metabolisms, and you also mentioned that you have tested people's metabolisms. How exactly does testing a metabolism work?
There's a machine. A person connects a tube to this machine and breathes through this tube, and the way calories are burned is when fat in the body turns into seltzer.
What?
Fat in the body actually turns into seltzer, into water and carbon dioxide, and the way calories are released from the body is through breathing through your mouth and nose, because your body actually breathes out this seltzer in the form of gas. So you breathe through the tube and you shut your nose with a nose piece, and the machine figures out how many calories you are burning. And the reason why it's a very recent invention is because the test only takes 10 minutes, and the machine has to figure out that your body is in your typical resting state, because the machine has to figure out that these 10 minutes are a representation of what you are throughout the day. So that's the sophisticated technology where the machine is paying attention to your heart rate, to your perspiration and respiration and other things that rhyme. Other big words. So it's able to tell if this is who you really are in a typical 10-minute span. And then it determines by counting the carbon dioxide molecules, it knows how many calories you're burning.
It only takes 10 minutes?
Usually. If a person is resting and the machine senses that the person is in their typical resting state, then the test only takes 10 minutes. But if the machine senses that the person is aggravated and fidgeting,
and their heart rate is up a little bit,
then the machine will take longer. The machine will discount any data it receives during the time that the person is fidgeting, and it will only take into account the 10 minutes where the person is in their resting state. For example, someone traveled from far away because she was convinced that she has a a slow metabolism, like many people who come to get their metabolism tested, and she blamed her weight gain on her metabolism instead of simply blaming it on the chocolate cake that she eats for breakfast, lunch, and supper.
Right.
And she was very excited to get her metabolism tested so we could confirm that her metabolism is slow. And while she was taking the test, her husband and I figured that we should maximize our time and he would talk about her diet.
That's always a good idea.
This way, we could utilize these 10 minutes to get some information about her diet. But meanwhile, she was grimacing while he was telling me about her diet. She was fidgeting and getting angry and making noises.
And all agitated.
So the machine kept blocking out all the data. And we realized after 18 minutes of trying to get her metabolism tested that we should refrain from talking about her and her diet. So this way the machine could do its job and get the metabolism test over with.
We see from here a side thing that talking about dieting can be very irritating and not necessarily very helpful to your diet.
Oh, anyway, so this person, she had a racing metabolism, which is very often the case. When someone thinks they have a slow metabolism, it's actually super fast. And I remember when I got my metabolism machine, I assumed that all the people who, quote unquote, couldn't lose weight on my diet, even though they were, quote unquote, following it, because they have in their mind a slow metabolism, I assumed that they would show up for metabolism testing, but they didn't. Some did, very few. Of course, they had a racing metabolism. And there's a lot of denial involved in dieting. A lot of people who are overweight, it's because they lie to themselves a lot. And a common lie is that I have a slow metabolism and that's my problem. The fact that a lot of people didn't show up for metabolism testing when I went out of my way to get this machine and advertise it tells me that they know deep down that they weren't following my diet. And if they would show up and get their metabolism tested and they would find out that the metabolism is very fast, it would be harder for them to believe that.
The myth of their slow metabolism will be debunked. Okay, so why do people believe that overweight people have a slow metabolism when in fact it is not true?
So, of course, it's a great excuse because if I have a slow metabolism, then it's not my fault that I'm overweight.
Right.
And this enabling nonsense that people tell themselves very often comes from family and friends. Now, it is true that it's not an overweight person's fault for being overweight, but the metabolism excuse is entirely untrue. There are other legitimate excuses why an overweight person is overweight.
And whenever you have an illegitimate excuse that people will stick to or people tell others that they have, it is enabling them to continue their not so healthy ways in this context and not focus on their real issues.
Yes. And another reason why people believe overweight people have a slow metabolism is because they see thin people who seem to be able to eat whatever they want and stay thin.
Oh, those are the worst people.
We hate them. And they also see overweight people who seem to eat very little and don't manage to lose weight, even though they seem to be eating very little.
Okay, so why are they wrong for believing this?
So it is true that there are some thin people who could eat whatever they want. And let's translate that into calories. For every thin person that could eat whatever they want, let's say it's 5,000 calories, there's an overweight person that if they would eat 5,000 calories, they would be thin. The problem is they're eating 10,000 calories. They eat a lot more than whatever the thin person wants to eat. And vice versa. There are some overweight people who, even if they eat very little, they will remain overweight. For every one of those people, there is a thin person who, if they eat very little, they will be overweight. And the way they stay thin is by eating less than very little.
I think I know one such person. I never see him eating. And when he does eat, he eats maybe 200 calories for a meal and he's full.
And he's thin.
There will be the same amount of people with a fast metabolism if they're overweight or underweight. The only difference is if you're eating more than what your metabolism allows you to eat, you'll be overweight. If you eat less than what your metabolism allows you to eat, you'll be underweight.
Yeah, and 90% of people have what's called a normal metabolism. 5% of people have a fast metabolism. 5% of people have a slow metabolism. And the 5% of people with a fast metabolism are not any more likely to be thin. And the 5% of people with a slow metabolism are not any more likely to be overweight.
Okay.
Another reason why people are wrong for believing this is that people underestimate their food intake or their calorie intake by an average of 700 calories per day, which is unsurprisingly the same number of calories that overweight people consume more than thin people.
That's right.
So since people underestimate how much they're eating, they think that they're eating reasonably well And they think that the reason why they're overweight is because they have a slow metabolism. Meanwhile, they're consuming more calories than they think they are. The reason why you see thin people who are able to eat whatever they want and stay thin, and overweight people who eat very little, is because you notice the unusual cases, so they stick out. It's unusual to see someone who eats whatever they want and stay thin, so that person is very implanted in your consciousness. That person
Is very unique.
is very unique and very memorable. And when you see someone who eats very little and is very overweight, that person is also very memorable. Another thing is that thin people tend to eat more in public and less in private, and overweight people tend to eat less in public and more in private. So it very often looks like an overweight person is eating less than they are because they sneak in a lot of food when no one's looking. And I could tell you that from experience, not just from knowledge. I was overweight in the past and I'm a closet eater. Thin people are not so self-conscious about eating in public, and they don't tend to eat in private so much. There was a couple who came to me. He was 100 pounds overweight. She was 70 pounds overweight. And they were convinced that they have a slow metabolism. And unlike the next story I'm going to say, I was able to properly assess what their metabolism was like. I realized that they have a fast metabolism, even though they're overweight and even though they are convinced they have a slow metabolism. And I put them on a regular diet, and they lost a tremendous amount of weight very quickly because I forced them to stick to the plan.
Force them?
Yeah, I have ways of forcing people to stick to the plan. For them, I had them sign a paper saying that they'll text me everything they eat. So once they were accountable by texting me everything they eat, they realized that they can't sneak in food, and they can't eat food that they thought were like free. Like, oh, I had a skinny latte from Starbucks. It's 300 calories. But overweight people who think they have slow metabolisms think that that's a free item, and they think that they don't count that. So a thin person has 300 calories for an entire meal. An overweight person will have that skinny latte and not even realize that they're having 300 calories. They'll think, oh, skinny latte has calories. It's a skinny latte, right? So since I had them accountable to their diet, they were able to lose a lot of weight and very fast.
So because they stuck to their plan, to your plan, they were able to lose the weight. So sticking to your plan is obviously great for losing weight, but in this case specifically with regard to metabolism, you will be able to tell more easily whether your metabolism is fast or slow if you actually are accountable and keep track of what you eat.
That's a very good point. People are very quick to make an assumption about their metabolism when they never once in their life stuck to a diet. How could you possibly know that you have a slow metabolism? You never stuck to a diet. Another story was there was a guy who showed up and he was thin, and I put him on a regular diet, even though he was insisting that he has a slow metabolism. I made a mistake, and I thought that his metabolism was normal. He's thin after all. A lot of people make this mistake and think that thin people have normal to fast metabolisms. So I put him on a 1,400 calorie diet.
And what happened?
Throughout the conversation, he was complaining that he's going to gain weight on this diet. So I knocked it down to 1,200, and I was convinced that he'll lose weight very nicely. And I had him write down everything he eats, and I had made sure. Meanwhile, he shows up the next week and gains a pound.
Wow.
And he 100% stuck to the plan. How is that person gaining a full pound in a week? And this person's legitimately sticking to his plan. The answer is like 5% of thin people, he has a slow metabolism. Just like 5% of overweight people have a slow metabolism. I was convinced he was breaking his diet because a thin person having 1,200 calories, you assume they'll lose weight. Meanwhile, I had to put him on an 800 calorie diet, and even on an 800 calorie diet, he was barely losing weight.
You mentioned before that it's not their fault that they're overweight. If it's true that they're in denial and the reason why they're overweight is because they are eating too many calories, so then how is it not their fault?
That's a good question, and you should really ask, how is it not our fault? We are both formerly obese individuals. So I'm saying that it's not our old selves' fault for being overweight. So there are some things in common with overweight people, and a lot of it is genetic, but it's not a metabolism issue. Overweight people have bigger appetites than thin people. Another issue overweight people have is that they don't have an internal regulation system that keeps their calories in check like thin people. Thin people, when they eat too much, they tend to get nauseous and they tend to lose their appetite 12 hours to 24 hours after they eat too much. Their entire system of hormones and brain activity is regulating their body to ensure that they are consuming the appropriate amount of calories. And another difference is that overweight people tend to underestimate the amount of calories they consume. They're not deliberately trying to overeat. They're not naturally good at keeping track of how much they're eating. Overweight people tend to be in worse environments than thin people.
Worse environments with regard to
food. Overweight people tend to be around more food, more fattening food, more food that makes you want to eat it, and food that when you eat it makes you want to eat more food. And overweight people think about food a lot more than thin people. I once did a study, and you should do this yourself. It's a lot of fun. Just walk around with a pen and paper and just write down what they're talking about. I found that out of the thin people, only 1 out of 10 were talking about food. And out of the 20 overweight people who I passed by, 7 of them were talking about food. So overweight people are much more likely to be preoccupied with food. And overweight people are more affected by their environment. We shouldn't talk about this without mentioning Brian Wansink, who is a big expert in this area of how our environment influences our food decisions. A study that brings this out is there were hundreds of people who were put in a closed room where there's no access to lighting, no windows, so you can't see whether it's night or day. They were in a room where the person who was orchestrating the study did a trick and set the clock to go fast. And over a 24-hour period, 36 hours transpired on the clock.
So only one day passed, only 24 hours passed, but the clock made it seem like 36 hours passed.
Yes, and there was food in the room. What happened was all the thin people had 3 meals over the 24-hour period. And the overweight people had 4 meals over the 24-hour period. And clearly the overweight people were affected by the clock, that the clock indicated that they're supposed to have 4 meals. And the thin people did not go by the clock. They went by their internal regulation system, which told them that only 24 hours passed. So that's very important. Thin people have bodies that are totally in tune, and this is a gift. It's not something that they earned. Overweight people shouldn't feel bad, are not at fault that they don't have this gift, but thin people have this internal regulation that tells them how much they're supposed to eat.
Yossi, why does it matter that people believe this myth, that overweight people have slow metabolisms? What does it hurt if they believe it?
So the reason why this myth is a problem is because it gives you an excuse. If you take away this excuse, when you realize that overweight people do not have slow metabolisms, you will be very motivated to do something about it because you'll realize that success is in your hands.
You are in control. It's not your metabolism that is deciding if you are overweight or not. You can decide by eating the appropriate amount for you.
So what we come out with from today is that you do not have an excuse, or at least you don't have the metabolism excuse. And if you failed in the past, it's because you are not keeping your diet, even though you think you are. Address that. And that brings us to the end of this episode.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you join us next time.